a difficult text. And as we attempt to interpret it, we should be humble. There are different interpretations that have been taken of this text. And I don't think that whatever interpretation we take, I don't think we should be divisive with other Christians in the church or among the people. There are three. Genesis 6 says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and they chose the daughters of men for themselves as wives, and they married them. So the question is, who are the sons of God that are marrying the daughters of? Well, there are three different interpretations. One is that the sons of God is a reference to the godly line of Seth. Cain killed Abel, so after Adam and Eve had relations, and Seth was born, and Seth carried on the godly faith of Abel. So one idea is that the sons of God are the descendants of Seth, marrying the daughters of men, the ungodly. Second interpretation is that the sons of God refers to angels, angelic beings, intermarrying with humans. The third idea is that the sons of God are heroes from the mythical past, tyrant kings. We have stories from the ancient Near East, for example. We have stories of a person by the name of Gilgamesh, and he was part God and part human, and accomplished many mighty feats. So how do we find the right interpretation? The exact expression, sons of God, only occurs 4 or 5 times in the Hebrew Bible. We have one occurrence here in Genesis 6. We have 2 occurrences in the introduction to the book of Job.
I think it's a
in the introduction to Job, we see God gathering in his...
Everything he just said, I think, is a combination. I think it's a combination of the offspring, you feel me, of Adam and Eve. I feel like it's a combination of where it says the mighty men of renown. It all goes together.
Heavenly court with the angels. The angels are called sons of God there. There's another occurrence in the book of Job, Job chapter 38, where God is challenging Job, and he says, where were you when I created the world? When he created, the sons of God sang for joy. So it seems to, it also seems to be a very clear reference to angelic beings. The last occurrence is in Aramaic in the book of Daniel. When the king looked into the furnace, he saw four there, and it says that one looked like a son of God, which would mean a divine being, an angelic being. There are only 5 occurrences in the entire Bible where we have the exact expression, son of God or sons of God, and it always refers to angelic beings. We must distinguish this use from other places. There are other people where they indicate that the relationship of a human to God is like a father-son relationship. So Adam and God have a father-son relationship. In the covenant makes with David, God and David have a father-son relationship. But it doesn't say that, it doesn't actually say that Adam is a son of God. It doesn't use that linguistic expression, and it doesn't say that David is a son of God. So the only time that linguistic expression occurs in the Bible, it always and very clearly refers to angelic beings. We also have the witness testament. So there are 2 passages in the New Testament that refer to this. One is 2 Peter chapter 2, and the other is the book of Jude. And both of these texts are very close. 2 Peter chapter 2, Peter is talking about how difficult days are coming for the Christians, and there will be people who deny the faith, who deny the truth about Jesus Christ, the truth about his work, there will be false teachers, and they will bring corruption into the church and destruction into the church. What Peter does is he appeals to the Old Testament, and he says, well, if God could deliver his faithful people in difficult times in the Old Testament, then he will be able to do it in the New Testament as well. Peter refers to 2 examples in the Old Testament. One is the story of Genesis 6 and Noah, and the other is the story of Lot being rescued from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And if you look in the Greek text of 2 Peter, it's very clear that there are 2 examples and not 3 examples by the use of the word and. So if God did not spare the angels who sinned, and he delivered Noah, and he did not spare the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he rescued Lot. So there are 2 examples joined by the word and each example has 2 parts, a negative part and a positive part, a negative part and a positive part. So when Peter is talking about the angels who sinned, he's very clearly talking about Genesis chapter 6, because this is connected with the story of Noah. Say, well, no, he's not talking about Genesis 6. Well, then my question to them is, if Peter is trying to encourage his readers from well-known stories in the Old Testament, and if the angels who sinned is not Genesis 6, then where else is the story? There is no other story in the Old Testament referring to. Some people think that it's the fall of Satan, but as we're going to see when we talk about that, there is no story story in the Old Testament that describes the fall of Satan. Peter is very clearly alluding to Genesis 6. Jude is doing the same thing, and it's very obvious in the book of Jude, talking about people who are false teachers, people who are going to deny the faith, and he also appeals to the Old Testament and shows how God delivered his people in the past, and he will do so in the future. He also refers to two events. He refers to angels who abandoned their proper dwelling place, their proper home. He also talks about the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And he says, since they, in the same way as these, committed strange immorality. Well, in the Greek text, the they refers to the angels. And the same way as these, the these refers to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So what the story of Genesis 6 has in common with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is that there's an abnormal form of sexuality going on. God can deliver his people from even the strangest perversions, will deliver the people who are listening to Peter and the people who are listening to Jude. He will deliver us. Now, someone might come to me and say, well, Jesus in the Gospels says that angels in heaven neither marry nor are given in marriage. So it's impossible for an angel to have physical relations with human women. Well, they're not reading the Gospels accurately and clearly, because Jesus is saying that when in Jesus returns at the end of history, we who are resurrected are not going to marry, because we're going to be like the angels in heaven. Notice he says the angels in heaven, and Jude says they left their proper dwelling place. So there's no contradiction between Jesus and Jude. In heaven, the angels don't marry. In Jude, they abandoned their proper dwelling place and they go to commit strange immorality. So there's no confusion. So it seems very clear. Genesis 6 is telling us that these are angels who are marrying humans, and Jude and Peter are telling us that is the correct interpretation. The next piece is, who are the Nephilim? In verse 4 of Genesis 6, it says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God had relations with human women, and they bore children of them. End of sentence. New sentence. They were the heroes who were from the ancient past, men of renown. There's two major sentences there. First one says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. There are two possible interpretations of this expression, they were on the earth in those days and afterward. What does that mean? They were there in those days and afterward. Well, some people think this means that the Nephilim were the children that came from the angels who married the women in Genesis 6, verses 1 to 3, and that the Nephilim were the product of these unnatural unions, and they appeal to texts from the 3rd century BC and 2nd century BC, the so-called Enochic traditions, the traditions about Enoch, where the Nephilim are interpreted as giants. There's another interpretation that's possible. When it says the Nephilim were there in those days and also afterward, it could mean that before the angels had sex with the human women, the Nephilim were there, and they were also there after the angels had sex with women. So it could mean that the Nephilim had nothing to do with...
That they was there the whole time. They came before, and then they was still there after, because after there was the flood, and the flood where Noah had his ark and everything, it was supposed to get rid of them, but it was like they were still there afterward. And that's how we still get Goliath coming after the fact. You feel me? Like, that was what I thought.
The angels marrying the humans. I think that is the correct interpretation for two reasons. First of all, I examined every occurrence of this expression and also afterward. I went to the Hebrew Bible, I looked up every occurrence of this phrase, and I examined how it was used, and the second interpretation best fits and suits how this word is used. So those days and also afterward, it means the Nephilim were there before angels cohabited with humans, and they were there after angels cohabited with. There's a second reason why this is the correct interpretation. They're the heroes who were from the ancient past, the men of renown. This sentence does not begin with and. Now that's very, very important. Almost every sentence in the Hebrew Bible begins with and. When a sentence does not begin with and, it does so for two reasons. It could be because it's beginning a new section, or secondly, because it's making a comment sentence, what we would call a footnote. It's very clear that this sentence is not beginning a new section, but it's acting like a footnote on the previous sentence. So the previous sentence is saying that the Nephilim were there before the angels and the humans cohabited, and they were there after. And it's making a brief comment that they were the ancient heroes. In this case, what Moses is doing is he's demythologizing the Nephilim. You notice, one of the things that we should notice is the text doesn't tell us who the Nephilim were. What does that mean? Why doesn't the text tell us who they were? Because they were well known to the first readers of this text. The first readers of this text knew who the Nephilim were and didn't need that explained to them. And all Moses is saying is, look, whoever you think these heroes are like Gilgamesh, these ancient heroes, these men of renown. You've read about them in the ancient mythologies. Whoever they were, they're not part of this story. They don't come from the cohabitation of angels and humans. And I think that's the correct interpretation. But the problem is, this has been a difficult text to interpret. And it has not always been interpreted correctly down through the centuries. And in the 3rd century BC and the 2nd century BC, they came to an incorrect interpretation. They thought that the Nephilim were giants who were produced by angels cohabiting with humans. And this got into the book of Enoch. And Paul warns his readers against this because he says in his letters to Timothy, don't argue over foolish myths. This is a direct reference to the book of Enoch, which has a long genealogy of all the angels until you finally come down to Satan, and then they blame all the evil in the world on Satan. What they're trying to do is they're trying to blame chaos and death and evil in the world on angelic sin instead of blaming it on human sin. And the Bible clearly puts the blame on humans. Genesis 3 shows how sin came into the world. How did we live in a world that is troubled by chaos, by death, by evil, by sin, by selfishness, by all kinds of corruption? That God made a covenant with the first humans, and they broke that covenant. They were fickle, they were disloyal, they were unfaithful, they cheated on God in the relationship, and they rebelled against him.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, most of this right here, I've just been listening to what he's saying. But now that I'm thinking about it, when it comes down to the idea of like people leaning on the idea of falling angels having dictated things that happen, and people lean on the idea that Satan was actually good and all of these things, it's trying to absolve the human aspect of fault, when in all actuality, we are just still as guilty as whoever taught us to be bad. Like, if our parents told us we could do and say whatever we wanted, including beat people up, sell rugs and all of this stuff, and then we get to be 30 years old and we're still doing all of these things without any remorse for repercussion, yeah, it's on us for the wrong that happens. So yes, even if fallen angels took part in teaching mankind certain things, mankind still took it upon themselves to take that into their heart and reenact it. So, okay, I get it.
And so when Jude quotes and refers to this material, he's showing that it's the sin is in the world because of human rebellion, of angelic sin.
Thanks for watching Honest Answers. Don't forget to subscribe.